Welcome to Humanist Views, a program where we look at current issues from a humanist point of view. I'm Scott Lohman. On tonight's program, we're going to talk with members of a group that meet here in the Twin Cities where they talk about the Bible. Yes, we have secular people talking about the Bible, and they'll explain why and the fascination and what the purpose of their group is, and if you're interested, where you can find them if you want to check them out. So, thanks for joining me on this edition, and my guests tonight are going to be Nuala Schallenberger and Steve Miller, and they're both with the Secular Bible Study. Welcome, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So let's start with the basics. Why did you guys set up a Secular Bible Study?
Because the Bible is a fascinating bit of literature and inherent to the way our culture runs. Everybody seems to have different interpretations about what it means, what's in it. And that's an interesting study in itself, much less getting people together to discuss their different interpretations of it.
Okay, so it's just to get together and just for the basics to find out what the book is. Are you looking at different translations or even that whole issue?
Different translations. Also at the books that didn't actually make it into the Bible.
Okay.
Such as the Gnostic Gospels, and also studying sort of ethical and other philosophical issues, that at least have information from the Bible that shed some light on it. So it's fairly free-ranging in terms of topics. A lot of it depends on the group itself or on guest speakers we get.
Okay, so how often does the group meet?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, okay. And we can find information about your group of going to your meetup on meetup.com, which they would then look for Secular Bible Study in the Twin Cities.
Exactly.
Cool, so they can find you there. So how long has the group been functioning?
I believe since about January 2009. I wasn't there from the beginning. I think Nuali had more time with the group. But
actually, I only started, I think, last summer. So the group functioned for a good long while before either of us got involved.
Okay.
And it was a combination. It meets at Trinity United Methodist Church, and it's a combination of a person who was then affiliated with that organization, Chester Gorman, who sort of represented the religious side, and then Grant Abbott,
Grant Steves,
who although an atheist, is very interested in the Bible and issues connected with the Bible.
Yeah, he's been a frequent guest on my program. He's a great guy.
He is.
He even gave me a very useful handout about which translations of the Bible are most accurate and which are the most, I think paraphrasing was the kind word he used.
Okay. So how's the approach? Do you guys pick a book or a chapter in a book or what? How do you figure out where you're going to talk for the week's discussion?
That differs entirely according to whoever is facilitating for that session.
Okay.
So, for example, we have a speaker coming up soon who's going to be talking about the documentary hypothesis.
Okay.
In regard to the Hebrew Scriptures. So his will be tied to, I happen to have taken a seminar from him on this issue, so I'm well educated about that. His will be concentrating on the first 5 books.
Okay.
And the 4 different strains that went into that. There's another speaker coming up later who will talk about feminism in regard to the Gospels, and so she'll be dealing with the Gospels, and presumably the 4 canonical ones. Though I think she will also be talking about non-canonical literature, like I would imagine she'll probably talk about the book, The Acts of Paul and Thecla, which is a fascinating book that I haven't read yet, but I need to soon.
Okay, so you guys are really just taking the basics and going whatever direction it suits your interests.
Yeah, and I would say this, because it's sort of a group that's a work in being, if someone was interested in some biblical topic and wanted to talk about it or have discussion on it, I think the group is very open to that. Like, one member of our group is interested in the book of Job, and he'll be giving a presentation on it. Another one is taking some college courses in the Dead Sea Scrolls. He did a PowerPoint on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's a very sort of freewheeling type of group, and we've had presentations on Mormonism, presentations on ethics. A lot of times we'll have a presentation and then a small group discussion. So
Okay.
it usually gives everybody a chance to give their point of view. And I guess the one thing that's always impressed me, considering we're a group that goes from, I think, the head of Minnesota atheists to fundamentalist Christians, there's a strong emphasis on civil discussion.
Okay.
The issue is not trying to persuade, trying to convert. It's much more, okay, let's share our viewpoints, let's say what the document means to us, as opposed to saying, this is the truth and this is why you must believe it, or this is why the Bible is total bilge. It's very much, let's talk about this,
Okay.
because this is a very fundamental part of our culture, and it's hard to escape from.
It is, and it's just fascinating that you do have a spectrum of people in the group. I'd heard about that, but I find it neat that you do have the full spectrum, so to speak, all the way from those who don't believe to essentially true believers at the other end, and you're able to have a great civilized discussion.
Very much
That
so.
is what we want in our society. Isn't that cool? And you're talking about a book that, a number of people say, if you don't do this the right way, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone in the group is into scriptural literalism, though I think
Okay.
perhaps some are close to that persuasion. I'm a Baha'i, so I look at it as one of several holy books, and that's my perspective
Okay.
on it. But it's a group where many times, unless they tell you, you're never totally sure if a person is a believer or a non-believer, so to
Okay.
speak.
That's true. That is one of the fascinating dynamics that goes on within the group, because even if people do declare their allegiance, for lack of a better term, even particularly among those who would declare themselves as atheists, there is a wide span, a wide perspective, wide variation in what sorts of approaches they take and what sorts of things they actually stand on.
Okay. That's a neat approach that everybody can then bring their perspective to it, and then you can explore those different perspectives without people making assumptions on where you're at.
Exactly.
Yeah, because like last week we had what Frank, our sort of head right now, called Bizarro Night, where we in effect argue the opposite of our position. So you said several issues. So like if you believe in evolution, you explain why creationism is correct. Or if you, believe in biblical literalism, you explain why, it's all symbolic. So it was I think, very good exercise. But one thing that we found was sometimes our bizarro self wasn't necessarily like I'm a Baha'i, my bizarro self could be an atheist, but could also be a fundamentalist Christian. And I think with many of the people who were atheist and agnostic, I think they were sort of finding that too, that, it's not, none of our belief systems is a monolith. And each is very individual, because we live in a society where it's like a cafeteria. You can pick the religious beliefs, philosophical beliefs of your choice, and that's what makes it very interesting. That no one's trying to indoctrinate anyone. It's very freewheeling, very open, and what do you think and why?
That sounds great. It sounds like you have some wonderful discussions. So as this group formed, it sounds like you've gotten just a nice spectrum in there of people wanting to explore different things. Have you gotten presentations then from all sides of the spectrum, or has it been more just sort of generic?
There have been presentations by people who are distinct partisans for their own religious positions, and they got a few well-pointed questions from some of the participants, which I thought was healthy and good. There have also been presentations from atheists.
Okay.
So yeah, there has been a wide spectrum of discussion, and part of the format of the evening is that discussion is part of the deal. So
Okay.
the speaker, whoever's organizing it all that day, that session, will speak for 20 minutes or a half hour or so, and
In theory.
and then we break up into tables of,
Okay.
of a handful of people each, and we try and mix it up so that we're not always talking with the same people, and that we're not always talking with people who we know have close to our own perspectives, which also keeps things interesting. Have table discussions for 5-10 minutes, and then everybody report back,
Okay.
and it becomes a larger discussion.
And we do have speakers who sometimes go past the 20, 30 minutes. You're always guaranteed an interruption with our group. So someone's going to stop you with a question. Like you had a very interesting presentation by a member of the group who's a Mormon, or Latter-day Saint, or whatever he would. I think he called himself a Mormon. But anyway, it was interesting because he talked about Mormon beliefs, the Mormon faith. He talked very much about what the faith meant to him and what Mormons do in their worship, which is, I think, different than the stereotypes you often get. But all during, people would ask the questions like, do you believe this? Do you believe that? What do you believe about this? And he was very open in answering them and answering some of the personal struggles he had within his own faith. So it's very open. And I know had one person one of these people who talks for a while, sometimes has trouble getting to his point, but he kept being harassed all the way through it, so the point came through very, very strongly. And but also, I think many questions were answered that wouldn't have come out otherwise.
So it sounds like it's a great group that allows you to express your opinions, to get those out, and still then give the good interaction between people on that.
And also among that, the structure of it gives some new information. The speaker
Okay.
will present very often stuff I had never read or never approached before. So it's not only people airing and discussing their opinions, it's also learning stuff,
Okay.
which I find very valuable.
Yeah, learning is a very good thing. We encourage people to read and research all sorts of stuff from our point of view, or looking at the other stuff, because that's how you learn, and learning is growth.
Yeah, and actually, like Nuali, I think is probably being modest. She knows quite a bit about the Bible, has studied it quite a bit, and even the table discussions, you learn quite a bit there. You get a lot of new information. You get you pick up something. And sometimes hearing yourself talk and maybe hearing what doesn't sound very good about yourself talking is also a good thing in terms of the learning process.
So yeah, that's how we can move forward and learn about each other. And when you're open to that, even with what your own approach is, it leads to better understandings of things. So what things is the group going to do as it goes forward? Are they going to just keep open with this format? Are you looking to help other places start these type of group?
Well, I think at the moment we're interested in our own continuity.
Okay.
Our leadership changed some months ago, and so we're more anarchistic now.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's the coalition of the willing. Those who are willing, like Nuali, to be coordinators, help suggest topics, keep things going. Before there were two sort of semi-charismatic figures who, I saw enough to be very impressed by. But now the group, I think, is sort of operating on its own more participation from people within the group itself, and it changes the dynamic. it's probably scary to some of us, wondering how we're going to come up with something new every 2 weeks, but somehow we're able to do it.
So that's great. So you've got good dynamics going forward. So what are just some of the more fascinating things that you guys have learned over the time period?
Oh, goodness.
Well, I think the lecture on the talk about the Mormon faith, which is very much one person's experience with it, was very meaningful to me, because they're a group that it's very easy to stereotype. And also, I mean, one of the reasons I get involved in groups is like I get involved in Muslim-Christian dialogue, and Muslims have problems with Baha'is, is that I was told once, this is what Muslims think, and I said, well, I need to actually meet some Muslims. And I was told what atheists think, and I thought, well, maybe I should meet some of them and see what is really happening in the world. Because I think that's one of the problems we have in this society, is we close ourselves off. I get involved in interfaith dialogue and all that, and at this point, interfaith dialogue is now sort of recognizing atheism as one of the interfaiths to dialogue with. But there's quite a perspective there, and humanism or secularism is a very important part of society today. On the other hand, I think religion is as well, but they're often two ships passing in the night. So being able to hear where people are coming from, what their personal views are, why they believe what they believe, is helpful, because I think we have to deal with human beings, not with the images we create in our head.
On the other hand, those images are a lot of the way that people do present themselves. My training is in history.
Okay.
So a lot of the reason I show up every other week when I can is to find out about bits of the history of that era and of that literature surrounding the making of that literature that I didn't know about before. So some of the presentations that have taken place, I learned some stuff about Gnosticism, and particularly about some Gnostic writers that I didn't know, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, because that's a whole fascinating branch of the whole discussion, especially when you go back and you try and find where it came from, and you start meandering your way through, and you start finding, not quite as clear, but it's way more fascinating that way.
Yes.
Yeah. That there have always been more than one Christianity. And, even every effort to orthodoxy has created yet another approach to it. And
that's an important part of the way the literature got compiled. That all of these separate books got written, and at some point a bunch of Orthodox people got together and decided which of these books of the vast literature that was out there they decided were close enough, didn't say enough of what their enemies said to make it into their canon, and that's the book we've ended up with. But all of this other literature, some of it we're finding again, and so we can actually read what they were reacting to, and so every decade gives us more of that literature, a better perspective on what the past looked like.
And that to me is part of the fascinating process at that, because I've read a number of books on looking at how the Bible was put together, and just going, it's just interesting as to what got chosen, what eras they represent, and looking at where even the audiences that various books were aimed at. That's why you've got, the four Gospels were written in a certain way, because they weren't necessarily they were sometimes aimed at a specific sort of audience that had a culture to which the way the story was told in that particular gospel was going to speak to.
Right, but particularly about the Gospels, the gospel to know about is Mark, because that's the first one. But we don't have any of. We have to guess from it what its audience was, and it's. because we haven't got any of its supporting literature, we're guessing there probably wasn't any supporting literature. Whoever wrote Mark didn't know about Paul, who had written prior to him.
Yeah.
Fascinating era.
Yeah, it is a fascinating area. Steve,
yeah.
did you have anything to add to that, or?
Oh, no, I mean, it has been, like we did a couple sessions like on Q, the source,
Right.
Okay.
sort of the source sayings gospel that was used, at least in the synoptic ones. So we've sort of tried to, take the gospels apart and look at what, could have been in there but wasn't, and also I think sort of going beyond that to some, philosophical issues or ethical issues, sort of what does the Bible mean to people who live in the modern day? And of course the reason it's a fascinating book and still around is because there is so much in there.
Yeah, you can find a lot of interesting things on that. So you've even looked at, even in our modern times, there's not quite totally one Bible for all of Christianity. We've got the Catholic Church that has what the Protestants call the Apocrypha.
Yeah, the Septuagint, they have 7 extra books.
The extra, and those sort of things.
And the Orthodox Bible has even more.
So there's even like 3 or 4 of them. So when they start and say that there's just one version, you're going to go, oh, not quite.
Right.
And so then as you learn about that, are you finding out the philosophies for why we have those different versions?
Certainly. I mean, if somebody were to present on that, that would be lovely.
Okay.
Or to present on bits of that, because of course it would be too vast a subject to cover.
Yeah, and certainly you're suggesting why you should show up to the meeting, Scott, and really present on some of these issues that you find fascinating.
Okay,
Since
well,
on the issue of why there are these extra books in the Catholic Bible and even a few more extra books in the Orthodox Bible that neither the Protestants nor the Jews thought necessary.
Okay, so there's a lot of fascination to that. And at the time we're taping this, which is in spring of 2010, the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a segments of that at the Minnesota Science Museum. Have either of you guys gone to that exhibit
yes.
yet?
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
Amazing.
Yeah. I myself found it really fascinating. I thought they did a good job of setting up the era. They did a good look at looking at the topography and the region of the world that it's in and setting that up, as well as looking at the different politics of people going around, the conditions they lived under, the politics, and doing that. And what I found fascinating was the preservation of those things. Especially the fact that once we found them, I'm amazed they didn't destroy more of them.
Yeah, the pictures of people smoking as they're putting together the scrolls on the open air table.
Right.
And also, at this point, we're still not sure exactly what the scrolls are, why they're there, and why we don't have other documents from the same era, why the scrolls survived and the library and the Temple of Jerusalem did not, or other documents
Well,
from that time
that's
did not.
one of the issues under debate, that the scrolls, and there are other scrolls that were not in the caves around Qumran.
Oh, yeah.
There have been some scrolls found around Masada. I've heard. I don't know
Yeah, and also,
how many of those were, but
Yeah.
that these scrolls, the theory that the Dead Sea Scrolls represent the output of Qumran is not universally held anymore.
No.
And so it's thought that the scrolls may well represent some of the library of either rich people in Jerusalem or scrolls around the temple, though all Jews at the time were found that literature to be very important. So
Okay.
so any Jews would who were literate would have wanted to preserve them. So yeah, I, as an amateur, that's not my area of study, but there were, I will differ with some of their interpretation about some of the early history of Judaism that they presented there. but all of the archaeology that they collected there, and certainly the scrolls themselves,
Yeah.
were very much worth seeing.
Definitely, and I agree. I've seen it myself. The other thing I found fascinating, and I don't know if this will travel with it, is they have pages from what's the St. John's Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a humanist who doesn't look upon the Bible as God-inspired, I still find, because I'm a big fan of books, I'm right now working on weeding out my library at home, which is scary
Never
and
ending.
tough at the same time,
Yes.
but I need to get rid of books in the house so that it won't stop sinking into the earth. Looking at a hand-illustrated, a handwritten book is just fascinating, and
Yeah.
as a piece of art, it is amazing.
Yes. Yes.
And also, it's fascinating, of all the handwritten versions of the Bible, no two are identical.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
I hadn't known that
yeah,
part of it.
Yeah, because when you handwrite, you're always going to have variations.
Huh.
Actually, the genius of the calligrapher who has taken on this task, he made just such an error. He dropped a word, and one of the really gorgeous pieces of art that he created on the page was a way of getting that word back in.
Yeah, a little insect is carrying it up to its proper place.
On a little pulley.
Oh, okay. I was looking at other things.
You
but
have to go back through.
I have to go. Yeah, that to me is just fascinating on the fact that humanity is still creeping back in there.
And they're going to change out the scrolls too. So the scrolls that were at the first part of the exhibit, they're going to put in new ones because they're concerned about their deteriorate if they're there for all the months. So they have 3 different sets of original scrolls that are going to be there.
Wow.
Okay, well, we've barely tapped into your subject and we're out of time. I want to thank both of you for being on the program. It was fascinating, and I'll try and get to your group because it sounds like you guys have a great time and talking serious about something that affects our whole culture. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to see you.
Okay, well, I'll try and stop by. Okay, for more information about us, the Humanists of Minnesota, you can find us at our website. That's humanistofmn.org, where you'll find other editions of this program, as well as more information on our group. If you want to comment about this program, or let us know what other topics you'd like to see us cover, send us a note to email, or there's an old-fashioned thing called a phone and a letter you can use to get a hold of us. So give that a shot. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Humanist Views. I'm Scott Lohman. Good night.